Set boundaries. Learn to prioritize your well-being in personal and professional relationships. Do you often feel overwhelmed by the demands of others, whether it be at work or in your personal life? Are you afraid to say no because you don't want to disappoint or be seen as selfish? You're not alone. Many of us struggle with setting healthy boundaries, leading to stress and burnout. However, setting boundaries is crucial for prioritizing our own well-being. We discuss the importance of boundaries and provide practical tips on how to set them in both personal and professional relationships. Understand the importance of boundaries. The first step in setting boundaries is understanding why they are important. Boundaries help us to establish limits on what we can and cannot do, and what we will and will not tolerate. They help us to protect our physical, emotional, and mental well-being and give us the freedom to make choices that align with our values. Without boundaries, we risk being taken advantage of, feeling resentful, and experiencing burnout. Understanding why boundaries are important is the first step in setting them. Boundaries give us the freedom to make choices that align with our values, as well as the protection we need to protect our emotional, physical, and mental well-being. They act as guiding lines to demarcate what we can and cannot tolerate and do. In their absence, we become vulnerable to exploitation, leading to feelings of resentment and easily succumbing to exhaustion. By recognizing the value of boundaries early on, it serves as the cornerstone of our ability to make advantageous decisions. Identify your boundaries. The next step in setting boundaries is identifying what they are. Take the time to reflect on what is important to you and what you are willing to accept in your relationships. This could include your work hours, how you communicate with others, and the types of behaviors you will not tolerate. It's essential to be clear and consistent with your boundaries to avoid confusion and potential conflict. The next step in setting boundaries is to identify what they are. It is essential to break down this process into manageable steps to be successful. For example, take the time to reflect on what is important to you and what you are willing to accept in your relationships. Consideration can be given to such aspects as work hours, the boundaries of communication with others, and what behaviors and attitudes you are unwilling to tolerate. Ensuring clarity and consistency in regard to boundaries set in place will minimize the cause of any confusion and conflict when dealing with others. In order to effectively set boundaries, it is important to maintain an objective and factual tone without becoming emotionally invested. When this is done, accurate information can be presented in a logical and manageable format, taking the guesswork out of what is expected from others. Be sure to also take into consideration the words and terms used. The use of reliable sources, technical language, and professional phrasing provides assurance that the message being conveyed is clear and concise. Taking the time to be mindful in regard to boundary setting simultaneously defines boundaries and establishes structure, an essential measure in the protection and maintenance of relationships. Communicate your boundaries. Once you have identified your boundaries, the next step is to communicate them effectively. This can be challenging, especially when you are worried about hurting someone's feelings or damaging a professional relationship. However, communicating your boundaries is necessary for both parties to have a clear understanding of expectations. Use I statements to express your needs and avoid blaming or shaming language. Don't be afraid to practice assertiveness and stand firm in your boundaries. Assertiveness and strength in one's own boundaries is an attribute worth cultivating. Don't be afraid to practice standing firm in your convictions. Doing so requires keeping your writing style closely related to the topic and your target audience. To do this, be sure to employ precise and concise phrasing while staying impartial and factual. Utilize familiar technical terminology to bolster your point, and make use of external sources to provide more pertinent information and context. Most importantly, maintain a professional voice when expressing your opinion to your desired audience. This keeps the tone distinct and readily understandable for those unfamiliar with the subject matter. Follow through on your boundaries. Setting boundaries is only effective if you follow through on them. It's easy to fall back into old habits and let others push your limits, but doing so will only lead to further stress and frustration. Stick to your boundaries and make sure your actions align with your values and priorities. You may face resistance or pushback from others, but it's important to remember that saying no is not a negative thing. Although it may be difficult to stand up for oneself in the face of resistance or pushback, it's important to remember that saying no is very much a valid option. Refusing requests and taking breaks are completely necessary steps in order to maintain a healthy life and environment. It's important to understand that self-care is the best form of protection, and it's okay to veto any activity or task that takes away from that. Negativity isn't attached to saying no, since being able to recognize when boundaries have to be established is a strong set attribute. Resisting the urge to comply with demands or give too many of one's own availabilities are valid actions, and there is no shame in preserving or regaining a sense of power and control. Understanding the diagnosis of a situation and making the ventures needed to fix it is a positive step forward, and standing up for oneself does not mean exclusion. Reevaluate and adjust your boundaries. Finally, it's important to regularly reevaluate and adjust your boundaries as needed. Your needs and priorities may change over time, and it's essential to ensure that your boundaries reflect that. Don't be afraid to communicate any changes to those around you and be open to receiving feedback. Don't be afraid to communicate any changes to those around you, and remember to be open to receiving their feedback. Showing proactivity when it comes to your interactions with others enables a transparent discussion around any changes, allowing everyone to bounce scenarios off each other and get aligned. Taking time to consider and absorb input from others helps make for stronger decisions and smoother implementation. Additionally, by holding yourself and others to high-quality standards, communication is better structured and clear intent is established. In the end, transparency and quality pave the way for successful outcomes. Setting healthy boundaries is not always easy, but it's crucial for our overall well-being. By understanding the importance of boundaries, identifying what they are, communicating effectively, following through, and regularly reevaluating, we can prioritize our own needs and avoid burnout. Remember, setting boundaries is not selfish. It's essential for maintaining healthy relationships and taking care of ourselves. Start small, practice regularly, and watch the positive impact unfold in both your personal and professional life.